6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We have commit and we have liftoff at 2:13. 5 million pounds of thrust, and it has cleared the tower.
Prepare yourself for a world of consciousness. This is consciousness.
Good morning, everybody. It is Conley here with the Science Nights in the Morning. We have a full crew today, and it is a very good show. I assure you, because we're going to have a lot of fun talking about cactus and succulents. We have Dr. Anirban Bhattacharjee, Dr. Thomas Shiller, all the way from Australia. We have Dr. Sean Graham and a very special guest, Tania Hernandez. Dr. Tania Hernandez, yes.
Yes, that's correct.
Very, very great. Very great. So we're going to be talking. Okay, now we are in the high desert right now. There are, I would say there's an abundance of succulents, and there's an abundance of beautiful cacti, beautiful flora and fauna, right? Flora and fauna.
Flora and fauna.
We're talking about the flora, though.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about the flora, but you know what? Hey, some people and animals like to eat the cactus, so there we might get into that. But I'm looking forward to this conversation that we're going to have with you, Dr. Tania Hernandez, and let's go ahead and get right on into it. We have the whole crew here. Let's go ahead and talk to us about what you do exactly in science.
Okay. What I do exactly, it's not a very easy question. I could define myself as a botanist, but I study more the evolution of plants. I like particularly cacti and other succulents like agave. I've been studying cacti for a long time, so I could define myself as a cacti expert, as an expert in cacti evolution, let's say.
Really? Okay. Well, I have a question for you. So when you were very young, what got you into being so intrigued and interested in cacti?
Well, I am Mexican. I was born and raised in Mexico City. And if you have ever been to central Mexico and you happen to travel a little bit around the area, you're going to see a huge diversity of cacti. You can see many different forms, many different types of cacti living all over. In central Mexico, we eat cacti a lot. It's very common to see cacti all over being used by people, like for medicinal uses, and people use them like in their houses, like as fences, and so they are part of our culture. So very early I got interested in. I didn't start right away with cacti. I was interested in plants in general. But later on my career it happened that I got more interested in cacti and succulents.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you, so did you get interested in your this cactus and succulents in during your PhD? By the way, where did you get your PhD from?
From the National University of Mexico.
Oh, and right now you're based in Arizona, right?
Right now I'm based in Arizona, yes. Yes.
Because I came into this thing later and I don't, so I was just going to ask you, where are you, are you based like in the University of Arizona or Arizona State or something like that? Or
That's a good question. No, so I studied in Mexico City in the National University of Mexico. Then I did my postdoc in the University of Arizona. And now I am working in the Desert Botanical Garden. This is a botanical, this is, I would say, the most important botanical garden specialize in desert plants, perhaps in the world. And it is in Phoenix. It is beautiful. If you ever have the opportunity to come, please visit. And I am working in the research department of the garden, but we are associated to the Arizona State University.
Okay.
Oh, very nice. Very nice.
So
congratulations. That sounds like a really cool gig.
Yeah.
Great job
Yeah,
for
for sure.
you, especially with your background. I just want to really quickly mention that, for our listeners, the reason why I really wanted to get you on the show, I don't want to give the listeners the impression that, you're doing some really cutting edge stuff. You're doing some amazing stuff, discovering and uncovering the evolutionary history of cacti and succulents and some other plants in Mexico. And so, could you tell us a little bit about the process that you go through to do these kind of studies? One of the papers that I read that you published is all about the evolutionary history of the cacti, and you had something like 400 species in your analysis, and you did all this great incredible analyses to try to figure out and untangle the history, how old cacti are, when the big branches on the family tree of cacti developed. So could you walk us through a little bit about that study in particular and how you do your work?
Well, for that study, yes. Okay, so my that happened a long time ago. And my advisor back then, she got a big grant from the Mexican government to study plant radiations. That's how they called it. So one of the biggest plant radiations or plant lineages abundant in Mexico is cacti. So they offered me this opportunity to work with cacti, and I accepted. And the project grew and grew and grew because so back then I was working in a molecular biology lab, and I was excited about it, but I was feeling really kind of empty because I really missed doing field work. So when I started with the cacti project, I was so happy because I could finally go to the field. So for the project, we did a lot of field work in Mexico, but this family is distributed in all the American continent. So I also went to do some field work in Argentina, in Chile, and we sampled a lot of plants, and we just back then what we used to do was just to take some tissue from the plants. It is very difficult to collect cacti. If you ever have seen one, it's not only the spine, sometimes it's the size. So we decided just to collect some tissue, pieces of tissue, and you dry it in the field, and then you bring these tissue samples to the lab, you extract the DNA, and you analyze that. And that's what we did for that study. So it revealed a lot of information about the family. So this is a family of about 1,400 species. As I said, distributed in the entire American continent, but there's few places where there's more species than others. So those hotspots are in Mexico and also Brazil, and Central Andes are where the diversity of cacti can be found. More importantly, and so yes, and we discovered that the family is quite relatively old, but the species we see today are very recent and things like that. We think that the family originated in Central Andes.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So
I think a lot of our listeners our listeners might be surprised to hear that cacti are found outside of the desert. A lot of people assume that they're only in the desert. And if you go to Central America, to some tropical dry forests and even rainforests, you can see even huge columnar tree cacti growing in a forest. And that's a little, for people who aren't used to it, that's a little surprising. One of the things I thought was really interesting about your analysis, and by the way, your paper, you keep talking about this like it's happened 20, 30 years ago, but that paper is from 2014. Not that long ago.
Yeah, but in science, that's a long time.
So one of the cool things I thought that I learned from it was that, and I was trying to figure this out from looking at all the branching, what this paper is, for those of you guys aren't seeing it, but it's this huge branching diagram of pretty much at least a couple of members of all the major cactus groups. And so hundreds of species, and this big branching diagram that depicts the evolutionary relationships of the cactus. And that's what we call a phylogenetic tree. And she's built this phylogenetic tree through all this hard work, which I'm happy to hear, a lot of hard work in the field, which is very interesting. We want to talk more about that. You do a bunch of field work, you get samples, you make this tree, you do all these incredibly detailed computer analyses. And I'm trying to figure out the big tree cacti, like the giant saguaro in Arizona, and the cardon in Baja California. There's big tree cacti like that in the Southwest and in Central America, and there are big tree cacti like that in South America. And I wanted to know if that was a totally independent evolution of tree cacti, if they're closely related to each other. And I think you can help me. Yeah, what I think it is that so they're not closely related to each other. So it basically happened twice. Cacti evolved into trees twice. Once in South America, at least once in South America, and at least once in North America, right?
Yes, that's true. Well, that's what we found with my study for my PhD dissertation. Yes, so we studied the evolution of form in the cactus family. Because this family, in contrast with other families like the pea family or like the tomato family, or so in many other families, like let's say with a similar number of species and perhaps of similar age, these families are more homogeneous in their diversity, in their morphological diversity, or in the different forms and kinds of ways of living that the plants have in the groups. But in this family, in Cactaceae, you can find barrels, trees, shrubs. You can have epiphytic cacti. You can have the nopales, puntias. And so it's incredible the different forms and ways of living that these plants evolved.
You mentioned sorry to butt in. You mentioned epiphytic cacti. Could you explain to our audience what that is? Because I think this is going to blow their mind.
Epiphytic cacti are those cacti that grow. Well, epiphytic plants are those plants that grow on other plants. So they don't grow their roots on the soil. They grow them on trees, basically. And you can have, there's no many epiphytic cacti species, but there's few of them in comparison to the entire family, but you can find them even in the rainforests of Brazil.
So I was just going to butt in and ask you, so if it's not in a rainforest, does that mean that cacti can grow on another cacti, or it will grow on a tree or any random tree? And is the relationship symbiotic or parasitic? So
no, I would say it is parasitic.
Oh,
and yes, because they don't. Yeah. Well, I'm not sure about, but they just. I would say like. So cacti don't need a lot of water, right, to grow.
Okay.
So if you go to a rainforest, it is very humid. And in the soil is too humid for cacti. So some cacti species, they found that if they grew on top of the branches of other trees, there's kind of a microhabitat there that is drier than, let's say, the soil. So they could grow there more happily than if they were in the humid
This is just
bottom of the rainforest.
no, I was just going to say, this just blew my mind. Like, you have a tree, like a cacti, which has evolved to grow in a completely different environment where we think cacti would grow.
Yeah, it almost sounds like animal behavior.
Yeah.
But this is interesting because the cacti that we think have the characteristics that resemble most the ancestral cacti are trees or shrubs that grow in humid regions in Central America, in northern South America. In more humid environments, they have fully developed leaves. They don't look like cacti. So we think cacti originated in more humid environments.
So the desert cactus is more of a derived condition?
Yes, it's a derived condition. And then epiphytic cacti are colonizing humid environments again.
And you think all this started in South America, in the Andes, is what you said, right?
We estimated that, yes, they might have evolved there. There's other plant lineages that are considered to originated in that region. It seems an important region for the origin of many plant lineages. I'm not sure about animals.
So what you're doing is molecular phylogeny. We've talked about that a couple of times on the show, but that's what you're doing, right?
Yes.
Okay. Because I know the fossil record for cacti is really terrible. I don't think many cacti have been found in fossils.
Yeah, that's sad, but it's not easy to find. Any desert organism is hard to find a fossil for them. So we have, so what we did was something called the molecular clock. And with the DNA data, we could estimate the date of origin of the family.
Very cool. And what was that date in your study?
It was, we think it originated around 30 million years ago.
Okay. So
yes,
not too long ago in geologic timescales.
Not too long ago, and it's a very interesting date because some other succulent lineages, we have estimated that they originated more or less at the same time. And back then, so we think by looking at the morphology that succulents, the ancestors of succulents were not very succulent. And they were not very well adapted to live in arid conditions. So the succulents and the adaptations to live in desert environments are relatively recent. So these plants evolved these adaptations recently, and their ancestors were not that well adapted. But when they originated, like around 30 million years ago, what happened was that it was not dry. It was not the environment, the climates were not as arid that we have them today. But there was a very characteristic drop-off in CO2 in the atmosphere. Mm-hmm. And these plants are very well adapted to low CO2 conditions. So we think that this was more than aridity, more than aridification, more than hot and dry. It was a low CO2 environment that fostered the origin of these lineages.
Very cool.
Wow, yeah, this is really amazing, Dr. Hernandez. And we would like to ask you more questions and get even more information from you right after the break. Is that okay?
Okay, perfect.
Okay, great.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This is Sean Graham. We are Science Nights in the Morning. We have a special guest today. Tania Hernandez is talking all about her amazing cutting-edge research on the genetics and the evolutionary history of really cool plants, cacti, and other succulents. And I'm so happy to hear, Tania, that you do field work. I was curious about this. We talked about this. We weren't sure whether or not a lot of molecular biologists, we call them gel jocks, because all they do is electrophoretic gels, and they just do all their work in the lab, and they don't do any field work. And I'm so excited to hear that you do field work, and you do field work in one of my favorite countries, if not my very favorite country to do field work, and that's Mexico. Thomas Shiller also does paleontology in Mexico. I do herpetology in Mexico. And I would love plants too. So would you talk more about your field work in Mexico? Give us some great stories about just getting in the wilds, the jungles, the dry forests in Mexico and doing field work.
Well, yes, I don't know if you have this feeling, but we don't do as much field work as we would like to. We have to be in the lab, and we have to teach, and we have to do other stuff too. But definitely field work is the part I enjoy the most of my work. And in Mexico, doing field work is amazing, but it's also tricky. And you need to, and especially lately, because it got insecure in many areas. So you need to be very careful, and there's not any manual or particular way to proceed. So you just need to do as you consider is the safest way. But particularly in central Mexico, field work is very interesting, because you take the truck, you drive a little bit towards any direction, and you can see very different environments and very different landscapes in a single day. So you can go through a more like a desert environment, and you can get to a pine forest, and then you can get to many different, you can even get to rainforests. So it is really very, very interesting. And that also, that is, so when I got to the US, I found the landscape a bit boring because you drive and drive and drive for hours, and you keep looking at the same species. And if you go to Mexico, if you go south, the more south you go, you see different species, many different. They change every time. So it is really fantastic. Bad thing about it is that it is, as I said, it is a bit insecure. So you need to be very careful. You cannot stop anywhere you want. You need to go with local people. So it is. So we have developed our methods. Each botanist develops his own or her own ways of working. So, for example, for me, I don't go to a single spot to collect. We usually go to many different spots to collect many different species in a single trip. But we need to take our time to stop at any little town or at every place we are going to collect. We try to speak to people. You see that in Mexico there's many little stores where you can buy Coke or something to eat, and then you stop there and you talk a little bit, and you ask if it is safe to go there, and if you could sample this plant, and people would usually let you know. if you can go or if you need to leave.
Wow.
So that's how we do. And there's other places that we know. There's not a red list, unfortunately. We have been working with botanists in Mexico to develop a red list of places where you shouldn't go at all. But it is hard because the situation is changing every moment. But there's some spots that we definitely, unfortunately, we never go unless you have a student that comes from that place, from that town, and he's going to go with you and he knows everybody. So you can go there. But otherwise, yes, there's some places, and this is very unfortunate because you are getting these dark spots in Mexico where we don't know anything about these places for 10, 20 years. Nobody has gone sampled there. We don't know if the species are still there. We don't know what's the situation. That's very unfortunate. Hopefully this changes.
Oh, wow. So, Dr. Hernandez, I do have a question for you. When you go out on the field, you're entering a different world. You're going into a new world. You're exploring. You're finding samples. But when your eye gets close to that microscope, you're also entering a different world. Can you kind of elaborate a little bit on the lab work that you do, and also just that world and what intrigues you about peering in to these different species?
So I had exactly the same type of question, but as you're going into the lab, so when you're collecting a sample, do you just cut a piece of the cacti, or what is exactly you're collecting? And then you can just go with Conley's question about intrigue and everything when you go into that microscope. Yeah.
So what we do when we found the plants we are looking for, we try to get as many information as we can about them. So we take a lot of pictures. So for many cacti species, they are endangered or threatened. So it's not advised to get the whole plant or to destroy the plant, right? So especially if you know that this locality and this species has already been sampled. So what you do is you take a lot of notes and you take a lot of pictures, very detailed pictures, and then you take a little piece of the stem, let's say with a pocket knife. You get a piece of the stem, and we bring our alcohol to sterilize the plant, and then we have sulfur powder that you put on the piece you cut, so the plant can heal and don't get sick and can survive. And then this piece of tissue, you put it in a bag that is filled with something we call silica gel. And this thing is made to dry things. So I have bought it at Michael's, and they use it to dry like flowers or things like that. So you put your tissue there, and the intention with drying is to stop the rotting process, because you want then to extract the DNA from that sample, but you don't want to extract DNA from bacteria or from fungi. So you want the DNA of your plant, right? So you dry it, and then you take it to the lab. In the lab, that's perhaps the most boring part of the job. Fortunately nowadays is the students who do this. And then they process the sample to extract the DNA. We send this DNA to be sequenced in another lab, usually a private company. And then this company brings us back the DNA sequences data, and then we analyze it. And that's some of the lab work I've done. Lately, I've been interested in the metabolism these plants perform. and the physiology they have, because they are highly specialized to dry conditions, and very particular dry conditions. So we also analyze them in their way they perform the photosynthesis, how they exchange gases, the oxygen and CO2. We also do that kind of work, but mostly we do the DNA extraction.
So here's a question for our. Oh, go ahead, Sean. I'll let the biologist go.
I was gonna. Yeah, thank you. It sounds like the field work's your favorite part.
It is definitely. Yeah.
Now, I know some plants are not particularly easy to find, even though they sit still. Like we always talk about how, our job is pretty tough because we're looking for, as a herpetologist, we're looking for things that are hard to find and they move. So that's tough. But plants are freaking hard to find, and you're finding some rare species. And do you don't be modest. You're good at finding plants, aren't you?
And sometimes, and sometimes it is. I have visited places like many times, and I can't find the plant I'm looking for, and I am there, and I call my friends. Where is the plant? Where did you see it? And I can't find them. I don't know.
Do the locals ever help you out?
Sometimes you have good days, sometimes you got bad days. The local people help you, but they do, so there's a limit. So you show them the picture, but it is a bit tricky. So you can go there and show them a picture of the plant you're looking for. And sometimes the local people say, of course, I've seen this plant, come follow me. And they take you walking like for hours, and it's not the plant you're looking for.
Yeah.
So it's better to ask for local botanists. If you are lucky to find a local botanist, that's much better. But those are usually scarce.
So,
in Mexico we still have, I'm not sure if in the US this exists, but in Mexico we still have collectors. So there's these 2, 3, 4 plant collectors, very famous. Some of them charge a lot of money, and they can also help you to find difficult plants. So that's another alternative when you are desperate to find a plant.
Yeah, I was going to say this. Your experience sounds a lot like mine in northern Mexico. I've done all my work up in the Chihuahuan Desert. And up there, I've relied on locals quite a bit for finding vertebrate fossil bones for dinosaur bones and stuff. And up there, you just bring a 6-pack of Tecate and hand it off to a guy, and they drive you like 30 miles and show you this place where they found some dinosaur.
Yes. Well, as a woman, it's not easy to take a 6-pack to a male you find on the street.
Yeah,
they might. Yes, and so interestingly, I do feel most of my students are female, and lately it's getting surprisingly it's getting safer to do botanical collection if you are female, because if you are male and if you are with your male students, so there's this bad people, drug dealers that might consider you are suspicious, and so there's a lot of stories about that. So I take my students to the field, and we just say we are professors. We come from the university. We're looking for this plant. People is usually very friendly, but the problems I faced are those, as I mentioned, that they might take you to the wrong plant, or they point you towards a hill or a mountain, and you go there and you don't find the plant. Yes, but I don't know. That's we do have beers when we go to field work because the heat, sometimes just a beer can calm.
Beer is worth a lot.
I was going to ask you, asking local farmers better? Like, do they help you out, like local farmers, instead of just like random local person? Are local farmers any helpful with that at all?
Yeah, so it depends on what I'm looking for. So, for example, this summer we're going to go collect this agave species that is very common, but we want to find it in the wild. So it is very easy that people would know where to find it. So we could ask random people on the street. As I said, I go to these local stores because in the little towns, people used to go to these stores to drink a soda and to talk. So you go there and you start talking and you ask for the plant, and they usually tell you how to get there or tell you who to ask for directions. But if I am looking for a more specific plant, a more rare, more difficult to find one, I wouldn't ask random people. I would definitely try to find a local botanist, like from a university or school nearby. There's many, for cacti, there's many, how you call this, enthusiasts.
Enthusiasts, yes.
Not professionals. You could also ask them, but this is also tricky because they might get the species wrong. But as I said, that's the way I work. Some people work differently. Each botanist developed a different system.
So here's a quick question, kind of on the same lines as Anirban's. In the States, especially in Texas, we kind of, in my field, we work around this stigma that if we do find something interesting or unique or rare, that the government's going to come in and sweep up the property. Is that same stigma? Does that exist in your part of Mexico? Where I was working in northern Mexico, it was all public land, protected land. But do you ever encounter people who are worried that if you find something that's really rare or protected or endangered, that they're going to lose their property, and maybe they don't tell you where they found the plant or something?
No, I see. No, what happened in my experiences with cacti. So if you find a rare cacti, you better keep it secret, because there's a lot of illegal trade of cacti species and cacti collectors worldwide. And some people would pay enormous amounts of money to get a new cacti species or the rare cacti. So local people get to know that. And if that happens, the population is gone. It's like in few months, it might be gone. So if in my case with cacti and agave, if you find a rare species, you better be quiet, keep it secret, publish it in a very academic journal. But even so, it's hard. So with cacti, the cactus family as a whole is one of the most endangered group of plants. So many cacti are endangered because the populations are small. They tend to be highly very endemic. So they can only be located in one place. That's it. Yeah. So they are very, and as I said, the illegal trade, mostly from collectors in Europe, has been devastating for the family. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll continue talking about cacti after the break.
Okay, we are back with the Science Nights in the Morning. Dr. Tania Hernandez is our special guest today, and you would never think. I mean, goodness. You are a doctor studying cactus, but you're also a spy. You're into espionage. We've gone all over the place with this interview. But Dr. Anirban Bhattacharjee has a really good question for you about cactus metabolism.
Yeah, and before this, after yours, and then we can talk about your locations that Sean wants to hear and everything. But I was going to say, so what is different about cactus metabolism that you said you now have gotten into? Like, is it different from the normal plant metabolism and photosynthesis and stuff like that?
Yeah, do cactus have to eat like 5 meals a day?
Yes.
Not at all.
Okay.
They eat very little. So what happens with cacti and other succulent plants is that they perform this particular type of photosynthesis called CAM photosynthesis. And I'm not going to go through details, but this photosynthesis has some modifications at the biochemical level that makes it very efficient in the use of water. So to generate the same amount of biomass, a CAM plant, like a cacti, uses 6 to 10 times less water than, let's say, rice or corn. So there's a lot of interest in understanding this metabolism and how this works. And basically, the research community around CAM photosynthesis, the idea or the fantasy is to understand how these modifications work. So perhaps we could be able in the future to modify our crops and introduce them this type of metabolism, genetically modify them to be more efficient in the use of water. So I think that's very, very interesting. Yes.
No, I was going to say that I can see sorry for intro, I can see the immediate implications with if the global warming continues, there's a lot of places is going to face a lot of drought, drought. And when you see that, if you can somehow incorporate this kind of efficient, water efficient form of metabolism, that would help in those plants too, in those areas.
Yeah, absolutely. But as I said, I refer to it as a fantasy because it is such a complex trait, the CAM photosynthesis, the CAM metabolism. It involves many modifications in many different enzymes and at the cellular level and at different levels, that it's not like a single gene changed and boom, you have CAM, right? No, it is a lot of different changes in different parts of the plant. So it's getting a bit complicated, but some people think it's feasible and are working towards there. Yes.
Yeah, I'm hopeful because nowadays you can see paralyzed people started to walk, and you can have people who cannot hear you can have implants to get them hearing. And so, I'm pretty happy about that. So
Tanya's going to crack the code.
Yes, crack the code.
All right. Now on to Dr. Graham's question here. Let's talk some more about your field work and the places that you've been.
Yeah, one of the things I thought would be really cool for our audience, that a lot of our audience are desert rats. They love the Chihuahuan Desert. They may not have heard about some of these locations in the southernmost Chihuahuan Desert or even beyond. There's one particular place that's really important to your research, important to the biodiversity of North America in general, and you can make fun of me when I try to pronounce it. It's the Tehuacan-Cuicatlan Valley.
Yeah.
How did I get it?
The Tehuacan-Cuicatlan.
Oh, so easy.
What does that translate into?
Sorry, didn't hear the question.
What does that translate into?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Tehuacan-Cuicatlan is a name in a traditional language. I don't know.
It translates into really hard to say.
Oh no,
hard to say. Yeah, but it's a very super beautiful, interesting place. Really, as Sean said, is some people consider it the southernmost portion of the Chihuahuan Desert. So if you like North American deserts, I would say the Chihuahuan is the most boring, except for the Tehuacan-Cuicatlan Valley. So it is really astonishing. It is so the landscape is similar to when you go to Tucson and Phoenix and you see these saguaro forests. It's kind of similar. However, when you get down the car and you start walking, you see huge, almost a different species at every step you give. So it's a fantastic hotspot of biodiversity.
And it's the location is very unusual because, I kind of set it up making people think, oh, this is like the southernmost tip of the Chihuahuan Desert. It's beyond that. It's south of Mexico City. So it's like an island of desert habitat surrounded on all sides by more tropical locations. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. And we think that's the reason it got a very particular diversity, a very particular assemble of different species and types of plants. Yes, it's a very particular location. I would strongly recommend to go there. And they have a botanical garden, and they make a big effort to keep that botanical garden going. They have some very beautiful, cozy little cabins you can rent to stay there. And there is a restaurant that is internationally famous, and they cook with local plants, flowers, cacti. It's a very simple, don't imagine it as a fancy restaurant. It is just somebody's house, open their garage, and they put some tables there, and that's the restaurant. And you can get, for example, ice cream made from the fruits of some cacti. You can have some other dishes made with the flowers of agave, things like that. So it's I strongly recommend going to that place.
No,
really.
As a person who loves food, right? I'm already sold on going to that place.
Yeah. And Cactus is delicious too.
You're saying there's a restaurant in a house. I mean, that sounds like every restaurant in Alpine. So
yeah, we're used to that. Yeah, and Cactus is delicious. A lot of people probably haven't tried Cactus. I've only ever had nopal cactus, but it's really tasty. It's like
I've never had it, so
it's hard to describe, but
yeah.
it's really good.
Some people find it not disgusting for the this substance
texture,
the texture and the substance. But in central Mexico, this is so. In central Mexico, we don't eat a lot of salads and a lot of lettuce, and that's like too fancy. We are one of our major sources of vegetables and it is cacti. So we eat cacti salad with almost everything. You mix nopales, you mix puncha with cilantro, tomato, onion, and that's what you have, 3-4 times per week. It's very common. Yeah.
So is this your favorite place that you've worked, or do you have a specific spot that you really enjoy doing field work
or
at?
any other place?
Well, the Sonoran Desert is beautiful. It is a very particular desert because it gets rain 2 times a year, differently from almost all Mexico. In Mexico, mostly all Mexico, we have 2 seasons, dry season and wet season. But in the Sonoran deserts, you get rain in winter too, a little bit of rain. So this is a very prolific desert, very green, with lots of animals and, very vibrant. So the fact that there's a lot of animals there makes, so the plants evolve different ways of, I would say that to show the flowers. So you have a lot of different colors and smells. So it's a beautiful desert, the Sonoran Desert. So
well, it sounds, you're almost describing the northern Chihuahuan Desert too. So it sounds like you might need to come visit us out here in Alpine.
I would definitely.
Awesome.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you, Dr. Hernandez. I really appreciate it. You're an inspiration. Is there anything else you'd like to wrap up with?
No, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. I also spent a good time. I hope it was interesting. And okay, that's it. Thank you.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thank you.
Dr. Hernandez, is there a way that people can look up your work? Can they look online or?
Yes. You just type my name online and you're going to find me. It's easy.
Okay. Tania?
Tania.
Hernandez?
Hernandez, yes, with an H.
Okay, great.
Yes, and perhaps so there's a lot of Hernandez in Mexico. So if you Google cacti, something like that, agave, you would find me.
Okay, well, thank you so much. We really do appreciate it. And we'll see y'all next week on Science Nights in the Morning. Thanks for listening to this episode of Science Nights in the Morning. Be sure and follow us on Patreon for exclusive gear and uncut episodes. Check out the latest science articles on our Facebook page and subscribe to us on YouTube and your favorite podcast listening app. You can also listen every Saturday at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time at BigBenRadio.com. And if you got a question, we'll join the discussion. Hit the hotline at 432-217-1983 and record your message. We couldn't do this without you, and thank you so much for listening each and every week. That's Science Nights in the Morning with a K, and we'll see you next time.